CJI2 in the books. Was it a success? Was it a failure? We're gonna break that down and talk about the results today on Logan Loves Fighting. So we'll get to the women's results and the super fight results here in a few minutes, but first let's start with the team results. B team getting past New Wave in the finals via 47-47 draw. There was a little bit of controversy to this. Basically what happened is it came down to the final match's result. In the case of a draw would dictate the winner. In that case, it was B team. Nicky Rod getting the win over Luke Griffith in the final match. Therefore, B team is the winner. I was actually watching Luke Thomas, and he was just talking about how Gordon Ryan is going to be having a field day with this. And maybe some of that is validated, but we can talk briefly about what we can do in the future to prevent these kind of things from happening. So let's talk real briefly about some of the controversies that happened. We'll start with what happened in the finale, the finals, with the 47-47 draw. It was listed ahead of time that if this was a case, that it would go to the final matches scorecard, which was Nicky Rod over Luke Griffith. Therefore, B team is the correct and deserving winner. Of course, there is some controversy about this. I think some of this comes down to being able to change some of the team format rules. I think one of the biggest things that we saw over the weekend was the draw situation negated a lot of fighters. It negated a lot of the excitement, and like honestly, we need a winner and a loser in just about every match. In a very rare case should there ever be a draw. And so I think if we change some of the team format rules with the draw situation, finding a way for another fighter to advance, or maybe adding in EBI overtime rules, I think this will solve a lot of the problems that we had for the CJI format this weekend. I also think shorter match times would be a big deal in improving CJI in the future for this team format. So what did you think of the main event? I want to hear from you. Drop it down in the comments what you thought of the main event and the final scorecard. I was super impressed with every single team that came out. There truly was not a weak team in the lineup, and I was majorly impressed by everybody, not only on B team, but there were a lot of guys that really shine on all the teams. Couple big shout outs to give to Kenta, a big shout out to Dorian. Dorian was all over the place looking amazing all weekend long. There was a lot of really good standouts from frankly all the teams. And on the other hand, there was actually some of the superstars that were actually a little bit negated by maybe the team format or the rule set, which was also very interesting to see. And over on the women's side, Helena Cravar getting past Adele Forterino in a very close and somewhat controversial decision, and then getting past Sarah Galvao in the finals. She did an amazing job. She's constantly improving and just constantly impressing all of us each and every day. The sky is truly the limit for Helena. And let's talk real briefly about the exhibition super fight that was Craig Jones versus Chael Sonnen. I'm going to be honest, I love Chael Sonnen. He is truly one of my favorite fighters. If I was to put another fighting book up, it would probably be his. But if you think that was a real match, you are a big silly goose, because that was the biggest fix I've ever seen. And look, Chael has had some questionable fights, to say the least, before in the past. If you think that was a real match, you're out of your mind. That was hilarious. But it was not a real match. I kind of knew it wasn't going to be a real match. It was very fun to see kind of the deep cut jokes of the whole, I didn't tap, three taps, blah, 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 all that Chael Sonnen inside joke stuff. But honestly, that was just kind of like a time filler and just kind of like a waste of time in my opinion. Next, we'll talk about the controversy of the taps that happened. I think this was on day one, but there were two separate cases of what looked like to be a potential tap, a Brazilian tap it often gets called, that were both called by the fighter or by the refs, and they were both very controversial. I personally thought the first one, that one wasn't quite a tap, but he did make it. You have to understand, when you're a fighter and the referee sees you in a locked on submission, he is making sure he is there to protect you. And so if you look at the ref, if you make certain reactions, the ref is going to do his job and naturally step in. And so in the case of the first heel hook that happened, I definitely think that was very close. I don't think it was quite a tap, but you have to understand from the referee's perspective what he's seeing, and it is fair in that case that it was ruled a tap. For Gio's case, unfortunately, I do think that was a tap. That was like really egregious, if you ask me. It's just one of those things when you make certain looks, when you verbally do things, the referee is going to naturally do his job and step in to protect you. So let's talk real quickly about a sad question. Is BJJ actually watchable. Coming from myself, a BJJ black belt, I love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but I have to admit, even for me, it sometimes can be very challenging to watch grappling. A lot of times I'll catch the highlights the next day, things like that. It's not as exciting to me as full-on MMA or even sometimes kickboxing, boxing. So is BJJ actually watchable? And if so, what can we do to truly make it watchable for all audiences, particularly audiences that do not actually engage in jiu-jitsu? We're in a sport where the people that are watching online and watching the sport, it's the majority of the competitors, right? And they might have friends they're watching that are not competitors, they're buddies of the competitors, but most of the people that are watching these events are competitors. So what can we do? We thought this team event was gonna be it. What can we do to make Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu watchable for all people? And it's important to know that this is a discussion with you. I want to hear from you, the community, on what you think could be the silver bullet for making BJJ able to grow and more watchable. So let's talk about the team format real quick. One thing that's really interesting about the sport of jiu-jitsu that is uncomparable to any other sport is that it is still growing in so many ways. Our training models are still improving and growing, and our formats are still, for competitions, are still improving and growing. And we truly exist in one of the few and only sports in which we have not figured out the best possible rules format to this date. We don't see any of this in baseball, any of this in football. You might see some slight rule changes here and there, like getting the pitch clock added or anything like that. But never at any point in the history of football have they decided, okay, how about we run 6 quarters, or how about we go to 5-minute quarters? And in jiu-jitsu, as you're coming up in this, if you're watching, you have to understand that the sport is still growing, developing, and learning. And this requires a relative amount of patience as we still discover what is the best possible format. Now, when it comes to the team format, I was actually one of the biggest fans of the team format. I was telling all my friends about it all week long. I was telling everyone about how it's going to make it so much more fun, so much more exciting. But I have to be honest and say, I don't know if it was the length of the matches or the amount of draws. I think it was probably the amount of draws there were. But it just fell flat. And by the end of match 2, I had a lot of friends who weren't very interested in jiu-jitsu that were just really not invested or interested. They were on their phones, not really paying attention. So I think shorter match times and getting rid of these draw eliminations would do a big service to improving the team format down the road. I definitely think the pacing could have been better, and me personally, I live in Tennessee. I'm not gonna lie, I fell asleep both nights before the main event. Had to go rewatch it the next day because it was just too late for me. And honestly, just the skits were just a little bit too much for me. I really loved the commercials. I thought they were very funny, all of those ads. But the Renato Laranja skits, especially the first night when he crossed the line talking to Tom DeBlas, it just really was distasteful to me, and I just didn't enjoy it, and it just felt like an overall time killer to me. And overall, this past week felt like there was a lot less hype around the event this time around compared to last year. And maybe that was CJI kind of piggybacking on the hype of ADCC last year. And with it not existing around, maybe it actually was a disservice to CJI too. And possibly just it being on Labor Day weekend could have done, there's a lot of factors at place that could have really went into kind of the things that affected some of the hype behind CJI 2 this time around. So do you think CJI was just a flash in the pan? Do you think that they're on their way to improving and continuing to make their brand bigger and more well known? Or do you think it's going to be a one and done, falling flat after that? Let me know, drop it down in the comments. So CJI's biggest goal is to make jiu-jitsu more widely known and popular for non-jiu-jitsu competitors. So do you think that this event was good or bad for the sport of jiu-jitsu? Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Me personally, I think this kind of was not a great sign of the sport for non-jiu-jitsu competitors. Again, we had a lot of eyeballs on this event and a lot of people, especially me, if you're a competitor, I'm sure you brought somebody over to watch the event. What did they think of the event? I want to hear from you guys in the comments. So what do you think CJI 3 will be like? Do you think it'll be a team format? Do you think it'll go back to the original singles format? And this might be something that gets discussed over the next couple months, not only amongst the community, but amongst all the people involved with CJI. And it's also going to be really interesting to see what it looks like next year with ADCC trials and ADCC coming up as well next year. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for watching my channel. If you haven't already, please subscribe and let me know what you think about my new home studio. Thanks again for watching and have a great day.